Do you know what really sucks? Is sitting down to edit your project and realizing that you have gaps in your coverage or shots missing. You need to have a really good, specific, and detailed shot list. Head over to filmmakersecrets.com/shot list, SHOTLIST, to get a killer shot list template along with some training where I show you step by step exactly how to use it.
Stay true to your heart, stay true to your project. The thing that I wanted to recreate was that spark that I feel when I see a musical. And I mistook that spark to be some kind of grand spectacle.
Filmmakers have the power to evoke emotion, inspire thought, and drive universal change in this world. So how does a filmmaker thrive in an environment that is almost intentionally designed to bring you down? That is the question, and this podcast reveals the answer. What's happening, filmmakers? It's George VK. Welcome to Filmmaker Secrets podcast, episode number 23. I am beyond excited to introduce my next guest, Adam Blair. He is the writer-director of a feature-length film called Hipster, the Musical, and just an all-around amazing genius philosopher, really genuine guy. So Adam, go ahead and say what's up to our filmmakers and reveal the one filmmaker secret that you've been keeping from us.
Hello there. What's up? As George said, thank you for that introduction. I'm Adam. The one secret, I guess, that I could give to everyone would be follow your heart. You know, I know that kind of sounds cheesy, and it is, but I think what I mean is that you want to tell a story, you want to make a film, and it's easy to get caught up in, you know, the image of making the perfect film or the Hollywood film, or you'll have an image in your head of what the final thing is supposed to be, but it's not supposed to be anything. It's supposed to be fun to make, and it's supposed to express what you want to make. So I think it's easy to get caught up in the rat race, but I have kind of a lot of more things to say, and kind of we can break that down a little bit more. But everything I want to say, I think, goes back to that, which is don't lose the drive for why I want to make the film to begin with.
That's a beautiful sentiment. I think it kind of broadens the whole picture. You zoom out to what's really important in life. And if you're doing something just for the sake of doing it because you've seen other people have success with it, doesn't mean that you're going to actually have the fulfillment piece at the very end. Like, yes, you reached your goal, you succeeded in your initial thing that you wanted to get done, but did you get fulfillment from it? Did you actually have fun during the project? Was it something that you actually wanted to create and tell that story? So I think that's a beautiful secret, Adam. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So take me way back to the moment that you got the spark to be a storyteller. What was that? What was the environment that was surrounding you? Tell me that story.
Yeah, well, I actually think it goes back to when I was a kid, and so I grew up in Denver, but my grandparents lived in Los Angeles, and we'd always go visit them in the summer. And my grandfather would always play Fred Astaire films for me, and we'd watch Fred Astaire films together. And I think the first time that I kind of felt that itch of wanting to do something with creating images is just watching Fred Astaire dancing on the screen, and just the kind of 1920s lilt in his step, that, you know, the tuxedo and the top hat and just the grace of him moving on the screen. I think that I started to feel the itch then. And I think even following that through all the way and wanting to make a musical, I think it's a direct line there. But yeah, I don't know. It's just that the feeling of just completely enraptured by just swept up in the music and the images and the dancing. And I just wanted to be a part of that as soon as I saw it. So I took tap dancing lessons, and I didn't become a tap dancer as good as Fred Astaire, unfortunately. So I went to the other side of the camera, which I think was fine. But yeah, I mean, when I grew up, everyone always asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said Fred Astaire. That was, but I'm not tall enough. So.
Unfortunately, that's something that we have in common. I took tap dancing lessons too. And the rhythmic piece of that style of dance, I think, relates a lot to maybe even editing, in the film production process. But that's a tangent. You mentioned a musical. You shot a musical?
Well, you were there. You know that I shot a musical.
I did. That was
You were the
my
director of
attempt at a.
photography.
That
Yeah,
was my attempt at a segue.
that's a good
No, but
segue.
tell me about
No,
it.
it
What was the
Yeah.
inception of that idea? Why did it come? Why did you want to make a musical?
Um, well, I was in undergrad. I studied film where you were. All of us were there together. We made a bunch of different films together, film races and short films, and I just felt like we had such a good team of people. And I really wanted to kind of strike while the iron was hot. And that passion of seeing Fred Astaire on the screen, it led into just a love of musicals in general. At that time, I was listening to a lot of musicals. I was listening to The Producers and Wicked, and Book of Mormon was a big inspiration. The recent Muppet movie came out with Jason Segel. And all those things kind of came together. And just every time I see a musical, something special happens. I just kind of feel a spark. And I wanted to try and just catch that. So I kind of took the lead of Book of Mormon, the kind of satirical style. And at that time, I mean, this was the early 2010s. It's almost been 10 years since I started.
I know.
Crazy. But
Dating
hipster
ourselves.
culture was I don't know where hipster culture stands now. Maybe it's like cool again because it was ironic and then non-ironic, and there's so many layers now. It's hard to know where it stands. But at that time, I think things were rife and ready for a satirical hipster musical. And yeah, so I wrote the music with our good mutual friend Sam Golden. He did most of the music. I did most of the lyrics, and I just kind of made a story about what it means to be authentic and true to yourself, despite all of the temptations of hipster irony that it makes it so easy to like give up and not actually be yourself. So, yeah, I would say that looking back on it, I definitely learned a lot of different things in trying to make a feature-length musical film with such a kind of a small skeleton crew that we had. I did a Kickstarter. I mean, our budget wasn't very big, just had maybe a few $1,000s here and there. Had to work with a lot of businesses to get things donated. But looking back on it, I mean, I think that the biggest thing that I would have changed, or I don't know if it's a regret because I did it and I learned a lot from it, but I think that I tried to shoot it past the budget that I had, or I tried to make it too big. And just going back to the kind of secret that I started with, stay true to your heart, stay true to your project. The thing that I wanted to recreate was that spark that I feel when I see a musical. And I mistook that spark to be some kind of grand spectacle, thinking that I needed, 100 extras, thinking that I needed the full orchestra in order to create that spark. But I've gone back and I've looked at smaller musicals, things like, Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, or some of the great scenes where it's just, in West Side Story, when he sings Maria, it's just him on the screen, like walking through the city. It doesn't have to be a grand spectacle. You can still feel that spark that musicals can give if it's on a small scale. And so I think that I tried to do too much. I mistook that spark for the spectacle, I think. And so I think going forward, the films that I want to make, I want to stay true to the heart of what I want to capture, but with the budget and resources that I have.
That's such an interesting point, because I think as filmmakers, we want to shoot for the moon, and we want to, imagine this world that's going to be grandiose and it's going to have the most impact. But I think a lot of times we misstep on the moment of realizing where you are at this very moment, like being extremely hyper aware of your current circumstances, your budgetary restrictions, and knowing exactly what you can feasibly execute. I think when you're writing a script, you definitely want to imagine the world. You want to shoot for the moon, make it as grandiose as possible. But then in pre-production, that's really the moment where you're starting to pull back on the things. And even in development, as you're rewriting the script, can you talk about your process of starting to write a story and then how that translates into the screen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, I think it starts with trying to find the kind of hook for the log line, the kind of what I want to say about the world or about people. And for me, this was, I knew I wanted it to be kind of satirical. I knew I wanted it to be about hipster culture, just because that was kind of where I found the comedic elements. And I kind of started with that general sketch and thought, okay, what would the central conflict here be? What would the character be? And I mean, hipster culture is all about irony. So I figured it would be, the main conflict would be a character kind of struggling with being true to himself and kind of struggling through that irony. And once I had that kind of seed planted, that I knew that was going to be the central conflict, I just started to explore what that character would do. Who would that be? And I think this is kind of another, I don't know if it's a secret, but something else that I find helpful about when I'm writing a story is once you have that idea, once you have a character, as soon as it's spoken out loud, as soon as it's on the page, I mean, they have a life of their own. And I think you have to learn to listen to them and, let them surprise you. Once the project is in the world, it's now a thing. And I think you have to have a relationship with it. And just like any other relationship, I mean, sometimes it needs a little space. Sometimes it needs some attention. Sometimes you have to try something new and let it surprise you. But I think like any other relationship, it also needs trust. I mean, I think you have to know that, as soon as I started developing this character, Dave, I thought, okay, Dave is in college. He's young. He has this close friend, Lily, who he's in love with, and he's kind of in a weird friend zone area that might be fun to play with, a kind of tension. And then just seeing, where does his nervousness lie? What is his relationship with his family? Having different free rights. Once I had the actor, kind of having conversations with him about it. Just seeing where it leads once it kind of has a life of its own.
So it's an ever evolving process. And you started with character and then you let that sort of speak through the rest of the actual plot. And you let the character, once you really know them so well, you let them drive the story forward. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think I would start with that. I knew the central conflict would be about his kind of struggle against this irony, this trying to find himself. And so I knew that would be the central conflict. And so I had the character, and that was kind of the general arc. Is I knew that this, like his journey would be one of overcoming that. And then I think it is this kind of tug of war, kind of playing through, what's the setup going to be, and letting the character speak through that, and then making sure it's going to lead through that arc. And maybe you try and force them in a new circumstance and kind of see where that takes off. And always making sure it comes back to the heart of that character. But also not losing sight of that bigger arc. So I'd say it's kind of stay specific to the scene, but then take a step back, and then the next scene, and then take a step back. And yeah, it was kind of a give and take. And also in terms of the musical, just that's nice because you can figure out where the songs are going to be and where the kind of high and low points are, and let that kind of divide up the story.
So that takes me to my next question. You have the script, you have your characters fleshed out, your plot, your conflict, their desire of the characters, like what does that character want? And then you decided to infuse this whole other element. Filmmaking is already difficult enough with all the different departments and all the different art forms that coalesce into a finished film product. But then you decide to infuse music, musical elements into and there were probably 7 or 8 different big numbers within the film. Mm-hmm. What was your approach to really converting this story into a musical, and what were some of the biggest roadblocks on the way?
Okay, well, yeah, I'll start with the more fun answer, which is the what the process was like to do it, and there certainly were roadblocks. So yeah, I think that I don't remember where I read it. It might have been in Howie Mobshewitz's class when we were talking about musicals, And he said that in a musical, when a character feels something so strongly that something can't be said, then they have to sing. And when singing's not enough, then they have to dance. This might be a quote from somebody. I don't know how to attribute it, but that kind of stuck with me. That idea of you want your characters to start singing when talking isn't enough, and then when singing's not enough, then they start dancing. And then when dancing's not enough, that's the kiss at the end, right?
That's awesome.
I think that so once I found the character and I kind of had these dramatic beats, I know that he's going to start out kind of being friend zoned. I know that Lily is going to get kind of wrapped up with the hipsters, and then he's going to feel this frustration and try and win her back, and he's going to be unsuccessful at first. And then she's going to be turned on by the hipsters, and he becomes one. And then the final number is him kind of struggling against his inner hipster. Sorry, I should have said spoiler alert before I said all that.
That's okay. You guys go watch the film right now, hipsterthemusical.com.
That's right. You can, please. Well, I'll talk about the roadblocks first, then you can decide if you want to or not. But
let's do it.
Yeah. So, so once I had those dramatic beats and I knew that I wanted those to be numbers, then I worked with our mutual friend Sam Golden, and we would kind of try and find the feel of the song. And he was really great to work with. That process was I would give him some songs that I liked from existing musicals for the kind of general feel of what I wanted. If it was, we have a kind of faster rock tune when he becomes a hipster, or the kind of creepy hipster song where they reveal their evil plans. And he would come back with some ideas and I would start writing lyrics, and that'd be kind of a back and forth. But I think that the biggest roadblock to those musical numbers, once we had those songs established, was just the constraints of budget and resources. Just insofar as, going back to what I was mentioning before, I had these kind of bigger, grander spectacles in mind that I wanted. Bigger dance numbers. I wanted all the flashy things. I wanted the complicated camera movement. I wanted 10 or 15 dancers all dancing together perfectly on time. And when you're working with students, with volunteers, it's wonderful because everyone's there because they want to be, and everyone's invested in the project. But just realistically, they also don't have all the time in the world. They're not going to be able to rehearse 8 hours a day. They're not going to be able to be there all day for 40 takes, however long it takes to nail all of those things. So St. John Jones, another mutual friend, he was the choreographer, and he also did a great job. But some days they had to get there. It was their first time knowing where we were going to shoot, just because we were also, again, a skeleton crew. These were mostly students. We didn't have time to reserve spaces ahead of time, pay to reserve spaces. So sometimes he would only have an hour or two with the dancers to teach them the basic movements in the space. And then we would start shooting it. So in my head, I had this grand, classical MGM musical image, but then we only had an hour to work with, students who are still learning basics of dance. And again, I don't mean to say that to denigrate any of the work that anybody did. It was all great for the resources that we had. But the problem was I was trying to shove a square peg through a round hole. I was working beyond my means, I think. And I think it shows in some parts of the film. I think the film still holds its own, but I should have shot for the budget that I had, just to go back to what I said at first.
I think that's the learning through line with, I think, any project, because you want to be ambitious and you want to make it as good of you want to serve the story. Mm-hmm. And the way that typically I think people want to do it is by bringing the flash, right? Bringing the spectacle, making it really eye-catchy and something that people will look at and go, wow, how did they do that? And I always talk about the importance of story. And I think no matter what kind of flashy elements of your film are present, if your story isn't there, it falls flat. People, what's the phrase that people always say when they walk away from a movie disappointed? there was no story, right?
Mm.
Even if it had the best visual effects, the most grandiose dance numbers, if the audience walks away from that experience thinking they didn't really get anything from that film, or they didn't understand what the message was or what the filmmaker was trying to say, that's when people will forget your film. There's a brilliant quote, and I can't attribute it to anybody either. I can't remember who said it, but it was, people will forget the title of your film. They may forget your name, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And if you can always reference back to how you made your audience feel, they will remember your name. They will remember the title of your film. I'd love to transition now into really quickly about the process of post-production you went through with Hipster the Musical, because I wasn't involved, right? I shot the film, and it was a great experience. I mean, we have many anecdotes and stories about things that happened, shooting on the weekends. It was super hot. There were different location company moves and changes in logistics and budgetary concerns. What was post-production like? Because it's quite a transition going from these, high stakes, long hours, a lot of things happening simultaneously, and then you're basically in a room with an editor. Or how did that work?
Yeah, so it was we had all the footage. We didn't really do any editing on set or anything like that. We waited until afterwards. And actually, my brother Dylan Blair, he did the kind of initial rough edit, and then I went through and I kind of fine tweaked it. And then another mutual friend of ours, Trevor Merchant, he did a lot of the color correcting and some of the effects, things like that. But I will say that for a large part of the post-production process, I was disappointed for all these reasons that I've been talking about. I had this image in my head of what it should be, and I kept, harping on my brother Dylan, like, oh no, make it look bigger, make it look better. It's like, I don't know, this is the footage you gave me. This is this is what we got. And I mean, sometimes you just have to be clever with the edits. I mean, sometimes you don't have the shots that you need. Sometimes the continuity is off, and you have to just deal with it as best you can. I know that after a few early rough edits of the film, the central story wasn't landing as well as I would have liked. This tension that Dave feels is that he's in love with Lily and can't really express it until the end of the film. But at the beginning, he wasn't a very sympathetic character. And in the edit, I kept trying to get that out. And he's very kind of nervous at the beginning. And there's a song that's kind of like the friend zone song where he's kind of singing and he's trying to profess his love and he can't quite get there. Mm-hmm. And he more came off as pathetic than sympathetic. He was just kind of a sad person. And you weren't really on his side. You weren't really rooting for him. You just kind of felt bad for him. And after a long time, I was going back and forth. Do we do reshoots? What do we do? The actors, I mean, this was maybe 4 or 5 months later, after all the principal shooting had been done, and we had been working through it. And, the semester had started. Like you said, we shot a lot in the summer. So we were dealing with, people had their lives. They were moving on. I was working on this on the side. And so that's all to say the actors, they'd gotten haircuts, they had moved away, they were scattered all over the place. They weren't in a place where they were ready to, film another scene to make this work. And what I ended up doing was finding just a few local kid actors, and we just did a little small framing device at the beginning and the end, showing Lily and Dave as kids. And Sam wrote a beautiful kind of sentimental song. And we just went to a playground. It was winter at this point. And we just had the kids just like walk around and hold hands and go on the swings. And they were really cute kids, which helped. And just seeing them just be kids together and putting that at the beginning, it kind of put things in perspective for the kind of sorry state that you see Dave at the beginning. Just something as simple as that. Something to get the character on your side. I remember I went to it was like a little talk back with, what's his name? John Musker and Ron Clements, I believe, the directors of Aladdin and a bunch of the Disney films. And they said in the initial storyboards, they struggled with something similar when they were making Aladdin, which was at the beginning, he was just kind of a jerk that was stealing stuff. And it's at the moment when he offers his bread to the little kids at the beginning after he's stolen things that now you're on his side. Like now there's the moment when the audience is now invested in the character. And so I needed that spark, that moment. And just filming some kids at the beginning and end with the sentimental score is kind of the extra X factor that it needed to kind of get you on the side of the characters. So
I love hearing about, I'm sorry to interrupt, Adam. I love hearing about your process. I just want to jump in here because I hope that my filmmakers are paying attention. I hope you guys are taking notes because there's knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb being dropped. You know, your process of thinking of the story and trying to serve the story every step of the way. You know, you wrote the script, we shot it, there were reshoots there, I mean to say that we needed reshoots, and because of this roadblock of not being able to get the original cast back together, you used your relentless pursuit of the story to be resourceful and figure out a new way. Well, let's add this scene that's going to justify, you know, the audience caring for the character to the beginning. And that wasn't originally part of the script, right?
No, it wasn't. Yeah, that was just something that, like you said, we couldn't. I mean, I would have loved, at the time, I was thinking, oh, we could set up, you know, show Dave meeting her, you know, as their original characters, you know, get the actors back, do that kind of thing. But like you said, there was just, the constraints didn't allow for it. And so, yeah, we just said, oh, let's just show them as kids. And I think it works.
I think that it just gives so much history to that particular relationship, because you see them, you know, as being friends from years and years ago. And then we reference back to the photograph of the two of them still friends. And that gives so much more weight to that first intro number where he's talking about, this is the day that I'm going to tell this girl that I love her. And I think the audience in at that moment is that much more invested. That's great.
Yeah. And a kind of happy side effect of that too is at the end of the film, there's a kind of big finale with, you know, all the characters are dancing, there's confetti, and it's, you know, it's kind of a general feel good, you know, the evil hipsters are gone. And, you know, you feel good. Dave got the girl, you know, Lily's safe from the hipsters and, learned who the true Dave is, all of these kinds of things. But, just adding 30 seconds of the kids onto the end too, really kind of drives it home. And it gave it the kind of heart that it didn't have before either. And I didn't realize that was missing from the end until we just tried it. You know, we said, oh, well, the kids are at the beginning. What does it look like if we just tack them on at the end? And it really helps it kind of go that extra mile. It gives it the heart that it didn't have before.
That's amazing. I have one last question about Hipster the Musical before we move on. Sure. Hipsterthemusical.com for anybody that missed it. You know, I talk about the desire of a character as being twofold. There's the internal desire and the external desire. I'm sure you're familiar. There's probably different terminology for it. But basically, the external desire is what the character wants. They might even mention it at the beginning of the film. You know, I want to tell this girl that I love her, for example. But then the internal desire is something that is not always apparent to the audience or even the character themselves. It's something that is typically only revealed at the very end when we've seen this character go on this journey. What do you think was that internal desire for your character, Dave? You know, he wanted to get the girl and he did achieve that desire at the very end. He gets Lily, they kiss, but what is the overarching internal need that Dave needed all along?
Yeah, so I think that's a good question. And yeah, so obviously, like you said, the external desire, he wants to tell Lily that he loves her. And I think his inability to do that kind of goes to his kind of the fact that he needs to grow up. You know, he needs to be more confident and kind of take ownership of his actions. Part of the arc of this character is that he falls prey to hipsterdom and loses himself a little bit. And I think his weakness at the beginning is his lack of confidence in himself. He doesn't quite know who he is. And because of that, he doesn't have the confidence to tell Lily he loves her. But he also is able to be pushed around by the hipsters and get drawn into the world of the hipsters. And so it's that same weakness from the beginning that he can't tell her he loves her that makes him lose himself. And ultimately, I mean, it's a journey of, it's a coming of age story. It's him learning to be confident. Don't look to someone else to make your decisions for you, to give you validation. You're enough. And he kind of has to learn that at the end. And he's not, Lily can't love him until he knows who he is either. Right. So I think that's his journey. And that became his journey because, again, it started with hipsters. And the thing that, about hipsters that I kind of latched onto is the kind of sarcasm or irony that they wear on the surface that doesn't let them be a true, authentic self. So that was his kind of inner journey, is finding that self.
You're enough, filmmakers. I hope you're listening to the way that Adam is breaking down his character. He's very critical of the writing, but also I think you have a very good knack for analyzing the story elements within your own stories, within other films. And I think that kind of practice needs to continue. And I talk about the concept of story hacking, which is just watching a film, consuming it for the enjoyment of the story, but also then analyzing it, watch it again and look for those different elements of character, of the desire, of the conflicts that stand in their way of achieving their goal. So I'd love to transition. You've been working and dabbling and obsessing over some other stuff that's unrelated to film. Talk to me about what's going on.
Yeah, that's right. So I, at the end of my undergrad, so I studied both film and philosophy, and I was kind of at a crossroads. Which do I go into? And I ended up going into philosophy and just recently completed my dissertation, get my PhD in philosophy.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And so my research is in perception and is in aesthetics. And I think a lot of the interests that I have there go side by side with the kind of filmmaking that I've tried to do. And let me try and think about how I can kind of put it in a nutshell, which is, so if you go out and you just experience something, if you try and describe it, whatever it is you're experiencing, you'll find that it's very difficult to really, really describe it very honestly. The color of the light, the quality of the texture of a piece of cloth, the actual taste of, the coffee that you're sipping, the soda that you're sipping, whatever it is. That kind of quality of experience, of the perception. It's that region of things that I've been really interested in kind of through artistry, how we can get at that quality of experience. And so I've been playing with a lot of, so my dissertation is about the kind of theory about what it means, what kind of knowledge that is, how we can access that kind of experience. And along with that philosophical stuff, I've been trying to do it in my own art in terms of writing kind of poetic descriptions, turning on an instrumental piece of music and trying to just describe it as closely as I can. Not in terms of a musical description discussing, there's a piano and there's horns, but, something like there's a spiraling flowing that feels green and blue, some things like that. And trying to evoke different sensations through other sensations through art making.
So let me see if I can, if I'm catching up with you. So you're blending the experiential, the sort of the sensory inputs that we get from the world, and you're mixing that and trying to sort of describe it in written or spoken word in some way you're trying to blend those two almost senses together, the ability to speak about something that you experienced. So it's almost like the internal going into the external of trying to actually put it into a communicative form, something that's so abstract as an experience. Am I right? Am I kind of getting there?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that kind of a very simple example that I like to give or that I like to do with people is to play, a note on the keyboard or play a song and ask people what color is the sound.
Huh.
And that question doesn't quite make sense at first. But as you kind of start to go through different colors in your head, oh, that actually it doesn't sound quite green, but maybe, bluish or purplish. And I think we find that our bodies, the way that we experience the world, it makes sense to kind of translate sounds into colors or, poetry into paintings or whatever that is. And I think because we're talking about film here, an easy example of how this works, of this kind of translation of things, is how scores work in films. The fact that if you play a scene from a film with, a sentimental score that's, in a minor key and sounds sad and slow and flowing, that scene, even if you're not paying attention to the music, it feels very different than if it's, a fast march or something upbeat or no music at all. Those feel very different. And that's because the way we experience things is through perception, is through the sounds, the shapes, the colors, all of these kinds of things. So I think that even though the kinds of experiments that I've been doing have been mostly about just playing with perception, what kind of different experiments can I do with poetry, for music, things like that, I think that it can still support your story insofar as anything that is seen or heard, anything that is perceived should be deliberately chosen, and it can be a way to communicate kind of deeper emotional truths to your audience. A kind of a simple way to put it is everything can be, sort of a metaphor. Every color can matter. Every sound can matter. Sound design doesn't have to be just realistic, but it can be speaking to something deeper about your character. So all of those details matter, I think.
That completely opens up my mind about the way that I would approach sound and colors and performance and camera movement, because you start to become much more intentional about your choices, like why you want the camera to move. Is it just because you have a Ronin or a Steadicam, or is there intention behind it? Is there a reason behind that choice? And you start to kind of experiment with things of like, okay, all of these different perceptions and different stimuli that are coming in with visual and auditory, how can I make that make sense for the audience without spoon feeding them, without telling them this is why this is the yellow color, this is why there's this sound here? It has to be on a subconscious level that then translates to the conscious level where your audience can actually decipher what the message you're trying to get across with all those different elements. That's
absolutely
brilliant.
Yeah, and it can definitely be, on a subtle level, like at the beginning of, back to Hipster, Dave is a really nervous guy. So, how does nervousness feel? Well, it's not stable. It's not a tripod, but, it might be a Steadicam where you kind of, you feel that jitter a little bit, a nervous feeling. Is it neutral colors? Probably not. When you're nervous, you're a little on edge. Maybe it's something higher contrast. The sound, it's not complete silence, but, you can work with the composer on what nervousness feels like. And digging into all of those things, like you said, it's kind of on a subconscious level. When you use these principles in your filmmaking, it can go a long way, I think. And the nice thing about it is it's fun to just do little experiments for yourself. If you get up in the morning and you're feeling a certain mood, it feels like it's a good day, try and describe what color that mood is, or what's the movement of that feeling? Does it make you want to dance up and down? Does it make you want to, walk? If that mood were a walk, would it be a strut? Would it be a jog? Would it be get down on the ground and start rolling around? And those are kind of extreme versions of that. But once you start to get in that mindset of how an emotion or a mood can translate into colors or sounds or walks, qualities of light, like you said, it kind of really opens up, and filmmaking almost becomes, you have all these different palettes that you can use. And as long as you stay true to what that character is, the script really becomes only one small piece of telling that story when you start to realize how all these other tools can be used.
It's a game, and it's a fun game. It's important to remain a kid as a filmmaker. I think that's great, Adam. So what's happening next for you? You're developing software?
Yes, yeah, I am. I mean, my running joke was always like, when I studied film and philosophy, is like, oh, great, if you fail as a philosopher, you can fall back on being a filmmaker. Which, no holds barred. It's not the easiest job to make a bunch of money at, no matter how close it is to my heart. But yeah, so I just grew up around computers, and so I'm doing software design now, just kind of by day, and still working on my art and philosophical things, before work, after work, that kind of thing. But I'm also hoping that using this, the software developing, I want to explore different kinds of digital gallery spaces. Something that I've been toying with, trying to do, is what I'm thinking of as a telephone game gallery online. So, a telephone game where I kind of whisper a word to you and you whisper that word to someone else, and they whisper, and then we kind of keep going. And then at the end, the word is something completely different than how it started, just because of how translation and listening can happen. But back to the kinds of experiments that I was just talking about. I imagine a kind of gallery where I play a short piece on the piano. I play jazz piano, so I could play, a short song on the piano. And then I give that song to a poet, to a painter, and to a photographer. And each of them try and translate it into their medium. They try and evoke that song. So what does that song feel like as a painting, as a photograph? And then we take that, photograph and painting and poem, and we give each of those to, you just have Brian Smith on. He can bake some bread based on the photograph. You could make a short film for the poem. I could take the whatever the other thing was and make it into a different kind of song. And then we can kind of keep giving these works to different kinds of artists. And then, I think it would be great as an in-person gallery, but I think accessing it online would be really interesting, and being able to explore, different combinations of the paintings and the visuals and reading the poems. And they're all kind of circling around this similar experience or the similar perception, and just exploring that, I think, would be really interesting and fun. So it's still kind of in its nascent stage, and I would need a lot of different kinds of artists that would buy into the idea. But
well, you already have me sold, Adam. That sounds super intriguing. I love the way that your mind works, because like I said before we started the interview, you just do not have limits to your creativity. You break through that ceiling. And I think that's something that every filmmaker needs to be able to do, is to not set limits on yourself in terms of creativity. You can always dial back, but like in any directing class, it's always easier to bring a person down in terms of their performance than to, demand and try to get something grander out of them if they're at a lower level. So that's amazing. I want to get involved. I would love to do any piece of that. So please keep me informed, and all of our filmmakers informed as well. And that brings me to my second to last question here, Adam. And that is something that I talked about in the very first episode of Filmmaker Secrets podcast, and that is tool trapping. You were originally the person that introduced me to this concept, and I have not stopped thinking about it since. So, our filmmakers already got my point of view of what tool trapping is. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. and I'm glad every time we chat because you bring it up, and I always have to be reminded of it because even though I know it, I fall prey to it all the time. Even in my coding work, it's not even about art. It's so easy to just get caught up in, but anyway, so tool trapping for me is just getting trapped by your tool, focusing too much on the apparatuses that you're using, the programs, the lenses, what kind of paper quality am I going to draw my storyboards on? The depths of tool trapping are just like creativity is unboundless. The depths of tool trapping is also, it's an abyss.
So how do you get over it?
So how do you get over it? I think that, I don't know if you ever get over it, to be honest. You can do your best to cope with it. I think the key is to just let your passion for the project stay centered. I think it's true for any part of the process, but especially for tool trapping. Actually, very recently, I fell prey to it. Our mutual friend, Sinjin Jones, he's starting a story podcast, Foundry of Ether, and I'm actually working on just playing some music for it. And I was listening and getting really into his story and kind of playing along with the music. And then I paused and I thought, oh, maybe I could record this a little better. And I kind of went down this long path of looking up different kind of audio software and making sure I had the right chords and all of this kind of stuff. And, 2 hours had passed and I realized like, I'm wasting time here. What am I doing? I have the piano, I have a microphone, I have everything that I need. In this age, as long as you have an iPhone, you can create world-changing art, even if you don't, if you could borrow someone else's, if you have a disposable camera, you can change the world, so there aren't really excuses anymore. And I think just making sure that passion, the heart of your story, every time you pull the notebook out to work on the project again, every day when you wake up, if you're going to start doing it, just remind yourself of why you're doing it. Let that be the thing, have the sticky note that says, like I want the spark of musicals, for me. Have that sticky note on the front of all your production binders. So it's the first thing you see, and just let that be kind of the guiding thread for you, whatever that is for you.
Let your why be the thing, filmmakers. Here is to your next story. I'm completely baffled by all the knowledge bombs that you've dropped here on Filmmaker Secrets podcast. Adam, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for so much for your knowledge. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to just drop one more knowledge bomb here on my way out.
Let's do it.
Because this has been so much fun, which is just like George here is such a great friend for me. The last secret is surround yourself with talented people and with fun people.
That's right.
That, Hipster never would have gotten done without all the people involved. So find good people, find good friends, have fun, and good things will happen.
So many talented individuals out there. You just got to go out there and look and ask. Yeah. The worst that can happen is they'll say no, which you just move on and go look for the next person.
That's right.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you on the next one. If you like that, then you are going to love my Cine Racing Challenge. This is a 7-day filmmaking competition where your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to write, shoot, and edit a short 60-second film in just 7 days for your one chance to win with over $10,000 in prizes. So head over to cineracing.com. That's cineracing.com to get registered. Spots are filling up fast and the timer is ticking before the next Cine Racing Challenge launches. So be sure to head over to cineracing.com right now to get registered. I'll see you over there.